Welcome back to Blam Blam Truckers. This is Beas, and what I'm going to be covering today is a couple of different characters I created for a RPG I was playing in. So this is the level of story that I normally bring to a character I create for an RPG. Um, Also, I'm going to show you how I wasn't sure. I had three characters, and I couldn't find the third one. I had three characters I put together for this RPG. I wasn't sure which one I wanted to play. I ended up going with Zhao Zhu, the Merry Gunslinger, which is what's on screen right now. We talked a while back on this channel about how game masters make their characters. They come up with the stats they need for the situation, for that character, and then they work backwards and create a story for why those stats would work. And that's what I did here with Zhao. So I'm going to go over the stats. I was playing in a Jedi game. I only got to play him once, unfortunately. But I was playing in a Jedi game, and I wanted a character that could match up with the Jedi and, in some ways, exceed them. And boy, did I get the right one. I built the right one. So I use the. Now, I need to explain something here. In West End Games, there wasn't very strong editorial control over the different alien species they created. There wasn't a lot of balance, which is a dirty word these days in RPGs, but it wasn't a dirty word back, and it's not a dirty word in my opinion. The various races had special abilities and different min maxes, and none of it really balanced out. The Transformers RPG balances out incredibly well. My fantasy RPG that I came up with D6 balances out incredibly, and the rest of the system really balances out the game as you continue to go. The special abilities tend to get drowned out by stats. As you progress, your skills are going to get higher than the special abilities really give you a bonus for. But I wanted somebody who was going to be a great shooter. So I came across the race of the Meri, which Meri, which are the only race in the game that start with 60 dexterity, blasters under dexterity. So I looked them up, and they have another couple of special abilities. They get plus 2d to sneak, and plus 2d to first aid, medicine, or weather. So I'm like, okay, I want to take advantage of both of these. So I'm going to give him a bonus to medicine, a bonus to sneak, and an incredible blaster skill. So at that point, I sat down and I worked out all these stats here. And you'll see he's average in knowledge, average in mechanical, average in perception, above average in strength, above average in technical, and ridiculous in dexterity. Very useful character. My kind of crazy min-maxing that I've become trademarked for. So that's where we start. So I'd actually be effectively rolling 2d plus, or is it perception, 2d, so 4d for sneak, and 3d for advanced medicine. And if I was making a first aid roll, I'd add that in, so it'd actually be an 8d first aid roll. Pretty useful guy to have around. Less balanced than most of my characters are, and my characters aren't known for being balanced. But he's less balanced than most of my characters are, trying to get that 60 and blaster to really work to my advantage. On the other hand, I beat the snot out of those Jedi when I actually played against them. They weren't much more advanced than they had a couple of adventures under their belt, and so they had improved a couple of times, but they weren't much more than first level characters. And 8D and Dex, 8D and Blaster really gives you a lot of accuracy. All right, so here's the biographical sketch. Okay, I got I'm on page 5 here. So I wrote about 4 pages for the background. I'm going to read it for you guys now, and I'm going to read it in characters. Let me get another sip of water. All right. I wanted to be a doctor ever since Pa got mauled by that Zolol. See, I was at the house with Ma. I was at the house helping Ma with something. Pa was tending the herd. Lucky for Pa, we were outside. We knew we were having Zolol trouble. We had some injured nerves. That wasn't why we had the rifle handy. We always had the rifle handy. Me and Ma were working out on some wood, something or other, probably mending a fence. We was always fixing something on the farm. Well, we heard a blaster shot go off in the direction Pa and some of my brothers and sisters were working in. So Ma and I looked over in that direction. I was already grabbing the rifle just in case, like Ma taught me. We heard the scream next. That was a Mary scream, not a Zolal scream. I don't remember taking the shot. It was one of those split-second things. I saw the Zolal, the rifle was already in my hands. The next thing I know, I'm running across the field, rifle at the low ready, going to see if everyone was okay. I got there, Ma right behind me. My brothers and sisters were already pushing the shirt on Pa, applying pressure where the Zolal had got him. Me and my brothers ran back to the house and got the repulsor sled. We got Pa back to the house into the truck, and Ma drove him into town to see the doctor. Pa came back home the next day, right as rain, not even a scar. Doc had a bacta tank. That's when I knew I wanted to be a doctor. I was 9 years old. We were homeschooled, 2 data pads between 12 kids and the home computer. Mom and Pa made sure we got an education, though, no matter how much we might protest. And we did protest. They went so far to get Uncle Pink to take me out on veterinary calls with him when local critters were sick. He wasn't a vet, but he was better at doctoring animals than any other farmer in 50 miles. He did a lot of stuff you'd normally have to call a vet for half price. Uncle Ping taught me real good growing up. When I wasn't working with Uncle Ping or on the farm or fighting with my brothers and sisters to get my schooling in, I was shooting. I liked shooting. I was real good at it, even better than Pa. Blaster packs are cheap, and I'd turn that power down real low, so I'd use a lot less gas per round than a normal round. I can get 1,000 rounds of practice shots out over a 100-round pack. I set up a range from the roof of the house out over the field, shooting cans hanging from the trees or the light poles. I got real good too. You'd think I would, you'd think it would make me a great hunter, but it didn't. Hunting is about being sneaky and tracking your quarry and such. Shooting good is important, but not as important as you might think. I could outshoot all my family, but I was the worst hunter. I could be real quiet, okay, but I wasn't good at the rest of it, like tracking animals and such. And I was never as good as any of the rest of them, not even Uncle Ping. Pa said it was because I spent so much time schooling, trying to learn doctrine and such. He was real proud when he said it too. I guess we can't all be good at all things. When I was 10, I started competitive shooting just like my brothers and sisters had. Unlike them, I managed to place in every tournament. I wasn't always first, but I was first a lot. I never scored less than third. I made some money doing this, and I pissed off my older brother, Nang. He hated that I was better at something than he was. Every time I'd come home with a trophy, he'd go out into the woods, and he'd came back with a trophy of his own. Of course, his trophy you could eat. I saved up my tournament money, and when I had enough, me and Paul went into town, and I bought all us kids new data pads. Data pads? Data pads. They weren't fancy none, but they were new, and now we each had our own. Even Ning said thank you. I felt real good that day. So one time when I was 12, the sheriff called up Paul and asked him to bring me into town. Turned out there was a standoff in one of the meat processing plants. Seemed someone had been fired and was holding hostages inside. Sheriff only had one window to shoot through, and I wanted to take the best shot possible, get him in one shot. Told us that the rifle he had was set to stun, and I wouldn't be hurting no one, but I'd only have the one shot. We were standing outside the window a good 150 meters away. It was a ways back, because he didn't want to spook the hostage taker. I was already looking over the rifle as he was explaining things to me and Pa. The scope was better than the iron sights I used on the old rifle at home. Bad guy came into view, just part of him. He had a woman in front of him. The sheriff and Pa were still talking. Didn't matter none. I took the shot. Clean and easy, hit him right in the head. Both Pa and the sheriff were staring at me for a second as I moved the rifle to a low ready. They started yelling at me real loud. I just stood there baffled. I had done what they had wanted. They didn't stop shouting until the sheriff's comlink started going off real loud. His deputy was giving the all-clear signal. I didn't help the sheriff again. We didn't get much crime out there, but he did let me come down to his range out behind the police station and ran me through the local tactical course he had set up there, and I got to practice back there as much as I wanted. That was lots of fun. At 14, I started driving into town to go to the new school with Ning and my older brothers and sisters. It was pretty new getting all them teenagers to do schooling together. I was way ahead of everybody in biology classes and some chemistry and such Uncle Ping had taught me. I was pretty good in math and galactic history. Languages was never my strong suit. I could talk okay and read basic just fine, but Huttese was tough to master. We got to play sports, and I was pretty good. I could throw real good, and I could run real good, too. At 16, I started dating Chow Lee. Lee was real pretty, and we got along real well. I was still studying my butt off and shooting every day and doing chores on the farm, but whenever I could, I'd swing by her place and take her for long walks down by the lake. She was real swell. 16 is when I won the local shooting tournament. That got me a shot at regionals. Won that too. So I got to go to the Continental Championship. Won that. So I went to the Marasee Youth Championship. Won that. Went to the El Rude Sector Youth Tournament. Came in second. I was pretty happy with that. It was my first time off planet. That was awesome. Ma came with me. I wanted to take Lee with me, but no one thought that was a good idea except me and Lee. I won the El Rude sector at 17 and scored third on the Greater Rima Youth Tournament. Now, most people out plan to say Greater Rima, but, you know, here in Marasee, it's Rima. It's always spelled Rima, it's pronounced Rima. At 18, I won the Greater Rima Youth Tournament and came with a full scholarship to the University of SW. I wanted to go. Nobody in my family had ever been a doctor before. The whole family wanted me to go. Even Ning said he was proud of me and happy I'd get to be a doctor like I always wanted. But if I left Marasee, what would happen with Chow Lee? We'd been talking about getting married and buying a farm of our own. We talked about it. We argued about it. We shouted about it. In the end, I went, but she wasn't happy. We agreed to wait for each other. I really did love her with all my heart. School was hard. Other kids had fun and seemed to have no problems blowing off classes. Me? I studied my butt off and was barely getting by. When I wasn't studying, I was at the school range practicing. If I lost my place on the rifle team, I lost my scholarship and back to Marasee, a failure, head hung low. Now that wasn't going to happen. I wouldn't let it. I wrote Lee every week, at least once, usually twice. I looked forward to her hypercom mail. It was the highlight of my week. I wrote Mom every week, too, giving updates of what I'd done to read to the family. It was in my second year that I got the chance to help the local police on Sluivan. They used the university range to practice. I had been working with them since my freshman year running the range for them to make some cash. It wasn't much money, but every little bit helped. I'd do shooting competitions with them sometimes, and I always won. They'd tell me cop stories, and I'd tell them about helping the sheriff. Cops don't shoot that great, not enough range time. But being a good cop is like being a good hunter. It ain't really about the shooting. If they had a standoff situation, they called me in to get another sniper to cover more angles. They deputized me and everything. There were 2 hostage takers this time. It was a bank robbery gone bad. They had a list of demands. They were threatening to kill everyone in the bank. My rifle was not on stun this time, and I had no problem with that. It was the 7th hour I was there. We had to go ahead to take the shot, but only if we could get them both. What that meant is if we had 2 shooters, each shooter with a good shot on different bank robbers. For what they meant, not what I, well, yeah, sorry. What they meant is if we had 2 shooters and each shooter had a good shot on a different bank robber. For a split second there, I had both robbers in my field of fire and no civilians. I did not hesitate. So after that, I had to find time to do training with the local police. They wanted to bring me on the force, but I was firm. I was going to be a doctor. So what we worked out was they kept me as a deputy and fast-tracked my bounty hunter's license. Most of the bounties I collected didn't come out of the local police budget, so they didn't have to pay me none. I managed to get a 2.0 GPA and graduate. The university was more than happy to extend my scholarship to their medical school program. Since I had been on the shooting team, we had won the collegiate championship every year. My relationship with the police was a big plus for the university, too. I was still going home for a few weeks to see Chow Lee and my family once a year. Those were the best weeks of my year. Chow Lee had gotten a job at the local tailor shop making dresses and doing alterations and such. We were talking about getting married still, and I was trying to figure out some way to move her to Slooey with me while I was studying. Medical school was so much easier than college had been. I struggled like crazy to get through my classes in college, and medical school was all about medicine, surgery, and diagnosing, and real doctoring. I was great at this. I mean, real great. Math and whatnot was rough for me, but that was all gone now. My first year in medical school was my easiest school year I'd ever had. Work was going great. I took out 3 bad guys in active shooter situations. If I could get 5 a year, the bounties would be enough to fly Chow Lee to Slooey, and we would be able to get married and get a small apartment and everything. Not that I wanted there to be more crime, the opposite. I just wanted to marry Chow Lee. Life would be perfect. Or so I thought. I went home that summer after my first year in medical school to a very pregnant Chow Lee. Not just pregnant, almost ready to pop pregnant. Zhao Ning, my older brother, was the father. They had gotten married. No one had told me. No one. Not Ma. Not Pa. No one. Ma and Pa said it wasn't their place to tell me, that Ning was responsible and he should have told me. It was bullshit. I told them that and left. I used some bounty money, the money I'd saved to bring Chow Lee to Slooey with me. Returned to Slooey early. For the rest of the summer, I chased bounties. I chased them all over Slooey then the Slooey sector, then up and down the rim of trade route. I was still a lousy hunter and a worse cop, but I worked with the local police and they knew where most of those bad guys were hanging out. They just didn't have the manpower to assault them or smoke them out. I had manpower to spare. Well, blaster power. I deferred to my scholarship. Some part of me still wants to be a doctor, but I needed a break from that. I've dived deep into my new career as a gunslinger. It's been 2 years. People say I'm a better shot than Boba Fett. I don't think that's true, but I'm one of the best on the rim of trade route, and I'm getting better all the time. I thought that was a pretty good backstory. I hope you guys enjoyed it. So the other character I've got is Vrax. And Vrax is a Verpine who have a special ability that adds 2D to every technical roll they make, which is so close to game breaking. It's not. Technical is one of the only attributes you can boost to not actually impact gameplay that much, because the GM has control over the resources you need and whether or not you get them to actually build what it is you want to build or fix or upgrade or whatever. So it's not a game breaking. It's the one attribute you can boost a lot without, and you're just bending the game, you're not breaking it. So yeah, I don't have character voices in mind for these, but I'm gonna try. Let me get a few It's a Traps by Akbar going. It's a trap! Trap! Alright, one of these characters is a Moncal. Building underwater is different than building in space. We're trying to keep the pressure out. Vrax smiled as Siddiq's croaking voice entered directly into his head. Vrax had modulated his Mon Calamari friend's comlink to transmit and receive on the Verpine telecommunication frequency. Now, Vrax didn't need to use a comlink to speak with his friend. By the way, Verpine are insects, are humanoid insects. Humanoids, I don't know how you want to put it. They can speak to each other through natural radio frequencies, using just with their antennae on their head. It is very different. I have lived most of my life in space. Your underwater planet is very different. Different is good, Siddiq asked. As long as it doesn't kill me, the Verpine replied. Different is good. Siddick's gravely chuckle transmitted before he said, That's a new standard. Very practical. Rex didn't get what was funny about it. Every Verpine knows this saying. The Mon Calamari and the Verpine grew silent. They were floating under the ocean on Mon Cala, looking at the outside of a late freighter. Siddick had a handheld sensor. He was pointing at the ship, calibrating the sensor. After a few calibrations, Siddick handed the sensor, I guess, to his Verpine friend. Vrax looked at the sensor, then at the ship, and then back to the sensor. You've rechanneled the ray shields and the particle shields to reinforce the hull. Why? Vrax asked. Siddick nodded. That didn't take you long to figure out. Underwater, we are trying to keep the pressure out. Ah, Vrax said, so you're strengthening the hull. It wouldn't give you much damage resistance in a fight. You'd be better off keeping the ray shields. Right now, I'm worried about the pressure of the ocean. Vrax cut him off again. You're not worried about combat. Could a regular starship do this? Bodies of water are a new concept for me. Of course they are, Siddick said. You grew up on an asteroid field. It is possible for a starship to go underwater without being destroyed, but most of them can't get very deep. The pressures get more intense, and you need a ballast system to dive. Most starships float in water. Metal does not float in water, Vrax countered. Siddick shook his head. No, it doesn't, but a bucket will float in water, so will a boat. Why is that? Vrax turned and stared at Siddick for a long moment. This is the buoyancy thing we learned about while studying hydraulics, isn't it? Yes, while we were at the university on Sluis Van. Do you remember anything else about buoyancy? Siddick asked, prompting his friend. It was their way, leading each other to understanding rather than lecturing. Most people found it obnoxious, but both Vrax and Siddick craved to learn, not to be taught. It was what made the two engineers gravitate towards each other and become friends. Vrax shook his head. Not particularly. I learned enough about it to pass the test. I never thought I'd use it. Only a Verpine, Siddick shook his head. Water must be a precious commodity on your home world. Not really. It's easy to recycle water, and if we ever need more, we just get another asteroid or comet and melt it down. Siddick's two bulbous eyes blinked. I never thought of that. I wonder why they don't do that on desert worlds. Like Hoth? Vrax asked excitedly. That's a desert planet. That's an ice desert, not a sand desert, Siddick answered. Vrax sighed. He was extremely knowledgeable about technology, but little else. What's the difference? Both are dry and devoid of ready water. Vrax cut him off. Ice is water. Siddick turned towards his friend and stared at him, a common technique they used to let the other know that they had missed something obvious. Vrax chittered his mandible, a nervous habit when he was deep in thought. You said ready water. Ice is not ready water. You need to melt it. And if the whole area is ice? Siddick prompted. Then you would have problems keeping it warm. Interesting. I have a few ideas. Of course you do, Siddick said, turning back to the ship. Sand deserts lack water to begin with. Vrax handed the sensor back to the Mon Calamari. So flying an asteroid to the planet would be a good solution. Siddick held his hand up, signaling for silence. His other hand touched his headset, clearly listening to something on his comlink. After a moment, Siddick shook his head and said, The Empire is here. We have to go. They didn't bring the ship to Siddick's home, rather they brought it to the nearest city. They were met at the door by Imperial stormtroopers in white armor. White armor was everywhere, as far as the eye could see. They were queuing up the Mon Calamari and leading them away. The Quarren were left alone, as were the various aliens in the underwater city. The stormtroopers were only rounding up the Mon Calamari. What is going on? Siddick asked the stormtrooper at the airlock. You need to come with us, Fishy, the stormtrooper said, reaching out to grab Siddick's arm. Siddick pulled his arms away. I pay my taxes. I am a citizen of the Empire. I demand to know what is going on. That's resisting arrest, the second stormtrooper said as the first stormtrooper brought up his rifle and slammed the stock into Siddig's face. Siddig crumbled. He was never an athlete, let alone a fighter. Hey! Rax said, attempting to push past the stormtrooper to get a look at his friend. He had taken some medical classes at university. He wanted to make sure his friend was okay. Rax stopped. Siddig's face was covered in blood, and he could see some of his face bones were broken. Vax didn't see the stormtrooper strike him with the rifle. He was too busy staring at his very injured friend. He was knocked to the ground, and the stormtrooper reversed the rifle. Vax was now looking down the barrel of a blaster E-11. It was frightening. We're here for the fishies, Buggy, but I would enjoy watching you cook. Rax raised his hands in surrender. He needs medical treatment. Get the fishy out of here, the stormtrooper said to his partner. The other stormtrooper dragged Siddig away. Siddig wasn't moving. After a moment, the stormtrooper moved the blaster out of Vrax's face. You even think of giving me trouble, and this turns into a bug hunt. You get me? Vrax nodded his assent. Unlike Siddig, he was an athlete and a fighter. He knew when he was outmatched. The stormtrooper kept his gaze on Vrax for a moment more, and then turned and walked away. This wasn't over. It's over, Vrax, Siddig said from behind a transparent steel window. They were talking on a sound-powered handset on either side of the transparent steel. It may as well have been Pritison. It can't be over. We can appeal to the courts, or to the Senate, or something. Vrax's voice was almost a whine as he pleaded with his friend. Vrax's eyes were focused on the makeshift bandage on his friend's head. He'd been staring at it the entire short conversation. It was a blood-stained scrap of fabric that had clearly ripped from Siddig's shirt. It covered over half his face. Vrax didn't like the look of it. His friend was hurt. He could help. The stormtroopers wouldn't let him. No, Vrax. The Senate declared my species non-sentient in a closed session. There's nothing we can do. Just like the Wookiees. Vrax didn't understand the Wookiee comment, but it didn't matter. He had to help his friend. I can talk to my Hive Queen. We can fix this. Siddig shook his head and moved his hand to the black bandage and let out a low moan. Vrax, listen to me. Go home. You can't fight the Empire. I'll get by somehow. Just go home before you get into any more trouble. Siddig hung up his handset. He stood and nodded. He turned around and left. Vrax sat there, screaming through his antennae. Every comlink within a kilometer was going off. It wasn't over. The Hive Queen said it was over. His parents said it was over. His representative to the Imperial Senate said it was over. There was one thing Vrax knew. It wasn't over. He tried to get some combat training in his home system. Vrax had done some boxing and wrestling in school, but he needed to know how to shoot a blaster, and plant a jetpack, and fire a ship's blaster cannon. No one in the Roche asteroid belt would help him. His Hive Queen had put out the word for his own safety. No one was to help Vrax learn how to fight. So he left Roche. The only other system he knew well and had contacts at was Sluis Van. The Hive Queen had no influence all the way across the galaxy as Sluis Van. Vrax hung out a shingle as a freelance starship mechanic and traded repairs and upgrades for lessons in space combat from mercenaries and bounty hunters and the like. He didn't tell them why. He joined a hunting club on the planet, traveling down from the space stations he worked at to use the range at least once a week. He went back to his university and studied books on structural engineering, specifically the chapters on controlled demolitions. He started an exercise regime focusing on aerobics. His focus was to end the blockade of Mon Calamari and free the people, or at least get Siddig out of there. It was during this time on Sluis Van that he met Mary, the gunslinger that he met the merry gunslinger Zhao Zhu. Zhao was a bounty hunter, a mercenary. He basically took any job that could be solved with a blaster, though he was just as likely to use his sonic stun pistol. He took Vrax under his wing and taught him how to use a blaster and how to think like a fighter. In turn, Vrax improved much of Zhao's gear. Zhao even took Vrax on a few jobs as payment for Vrax's services. Once Vrax felt ready, he joined a mercenary team, Harry's Heroes. Mostly they did escort work in the Outer Rim. Vrax joined up as a gunner on the starfighter. As a gunner on their starfighters, mostly with the ARC-170 and Y-wing starfighters. During his downtime, he was pestering his fellow mercenaries to train with him, often upgrading their weapons and armor in return for training sessions. It was during this time that Vrax earned the eternal hatred of the dire, dreaded, infamous pirate, Captain Lepidemain. It started with an escort contract with the Bakura Mining Corporation, guarding a convoy of bulk freighters from Bakura to Anaj through the mostly uninhabited Model sector. At the time, Harry's heroes were flying 3 ARC-170s they had bought in an Imperial surplus sale. Over a few weeks, Harry's heroes chased out the pirates 3 times. It was the fourth time that Lepidemain's pirates damaged one of the bulk freighters' hyperdrive. The convoy had to limp to a nearby star system named Endor. There was a forest moon around a gas giant where they could set down and effect repairs. The convoy landed in one of the forest moon's vast oceans. As Siddig had said, most starships are buoyant. Vrax was pulled out of his fighter and sent over to help the bulk freighter crew with repairs. Most of Harry's heroes went with him. Spend a few hours in a starfighter cockpit, and you'll take any excuse to stretch your legs. Little did they know, the pirates were using Endor as a staging ground for their raids. They had taken over a small drug running base that used to be used for processing Rachna Blue, an incredibly powerful spice that was made from a fungus found exclusively on the forest moon of Endor. The pirates flew low to the ocean, well under radar, and surprised the mercenaries and their convoy in an ambush. The starfighters were destroyed in the pirates' first salvo. Luckily, most of the mercenaries were aboard the broken bulk freighter. Lepidemain took them all captive and brought them back to his base. Recognizing Vrax as a Verpine, he immediately put him to work on maintaining his small pirate fleet of light freighters. Vrax was surprisingly compliant. The light from the gas giant Endor was softly fading over the horizon. Vrax finished turning the last bolt, holding the enclosure in place on one of the ship's stabilizers. He looked up, watching the colors play through the atmosphere as dusk came upon the planet. You do good work, Verpine. Vrax jumped. He turned, seeing a fat human dressed gaudily in expensive clothes and jewelry. He had long hair and an exquisitely unkempt beard, all under a hat with the largest brim Vrax had ever seen. The human was armed with a heavy blaster pistol tucked into his belt and a vibro rapier in a sheath on his hip. Sloppy. Blasters should be in holsters. Tucking one into your belt was a good way to discharge it by accident. Captain Lepidemain, Vrax said. You startled me. The corpulent man laughed heartily. The day I can't sneak up on a landlubber is the day I pack it in. Now, you are willing to help us, but the rest of your fellow mercenaries are resistant. Why? Why? Vrax shrugged. Let's not fool ourselves, Captain. You're a pirate with a reputation for violence. If there is no profit in it, you won't hesitate to kill all of us to save on food costs. I am a poor Verpine. There is no one willing to pay a ransom for me. My only hope to see Endor rise tomorrow is to gain your favor. Luckily, I have some skill with technology. Lepidemain nodded. Practical. Vrax nodded, consciously mimicking the human's movements. As I said, there's no point fooling ourselves, or sugarcoating it. The captain began to pace. The rest of your crew does not see it that way. Of course they don't, Vrax replied, trying not to pace himself. The human stopped pacing and glared at him. And why is that? Oh, sorry, Vrax said. I thought you knew. Most of us are veterans of the Clone Wars. Whichever side they fought on, they fought honorably and for a worthy cause. Honor is a powerful thing. Lepidemain laughed. And you? You have no honor? Vrax tilted his head to one side. I have honor, but I did not fight in the Clone Wars. I was only a child. I am a mercenary. I fight for money and for my crew. The pirate started pacing again. Loyalty. I can work with that. It is time to parley. You're right. I would gladly kill your crew to save money on food, and I thought any of them could raise a decent ransom. But you're in luck. I have enough BEP to feed your crew for years. Every prize we catch carries a reserve supply of this stuff. I feed prisoners with it. BEP was a Bith foodstuff that grew in 2-inch cubes. It was pink, utterly flavorless, and unable to be flavored, had an unpleasant texture that was too soft yet unexpectedly lumpy, and had all the nutritional value any sentient needed. No one liked it. No one. Not even the Biff. And BEP was about all they could digest. But everyone carried it. BEP was an efficient emergency ration. Vrax didn't show his disgust. Efficient, Captain. Yes, well, the Petamain rubbed his beard as he paced. I will let you live, and your crew. In return, you will fix my ships for me. This run has dried up. Yours was the last good convoy. It will be time to move on in a month or two after we've snapped up these scraps. When we go, I will leave you and your crew here with the BEP and an emergency hypercom beacon. Do we have an accord? Rax nodded. We have an accord. An accord. They shook. They didn't let Vrax back in with the crew. He couldn't tell them he had worked out a deal. They just saw him working with the enemy and eating at the pirates' table while they ate BEP. Vrax imagined they hated him for it. It became apparent very early on that while there were mechanics amongst the pirates, none of them were very good. Most of them were average or slightly above average. Vrax wasn't just maintaining the pirate fleet. He was improving it, and they loved him for it. It took Vrax a week to come up with a plan. He began to sabotage the hyperdrives of the pirate ships. All the hyperdrives, and all the backup hyperdrives. Sabotage was simple enough. He set up a comm link to a capacitor. The capacitor was linked in by a long wire to the hyperdrive motivator coil. When he signaled the comm link, it would open the circuit and the electricity from the capacitor would burn out the coil. No coil, no hyperspace. It was a common enough malfunction if you knew what to look for. If a coil burned out, then you just had to replace it, and the hyperdrive motivator coils were a common part. You could get one at any starship repair shop for 10 credits. The nearest starship shop was on Bakura. It may as well have been on Coruscant. The piece de resistance was that Vrax had set the comlinks to respond to his natural Verpine telecommunication signal, so he was the only one who could set it off. No chance of accidentally being discovered. The rest of his plan took almost a month. He needed to hide tools that would allow him to circumvent the locks on the prisoners' doors. He needed to hide a vibro knife to handle their bonds. What he really needed was a blaster to deal with any problems that may arise during the jailbreak. The pirates were lousy mechanics, but they were excellent guards. Vrax was working on the ships for 2 weeks before the pirates stopped watching him enough for him to start hiding tools. Even then he was cautious. Another week for the vibro knife. Another week for the blaster. It was 0330 when Vrax arose, gathered his supplies, and went to open the prisoner's door. There was a guard at the door, a Gamorrean who was asleep. Vrax managed to open the door without waking the guard. He stepped inside, closing the door after him, and got hit hard. And got hit from behind, knocking him to the ground. "Stop!" he hissed. "It's me, Vrax!" "You traitorous scum!" he heard Bruno, the executive officer of Harry's heroes, whisper. "I should kill you right now." Harry, a Wookiee, let out a quiet growl and said in Huttese, "Clearly he came to rescue us." "Exactly," Vrax said, handing Harry the vibro knife. "Start freeing everyone. If the guard wakes up, we're in trouble." The hum of the vibro knife is quiet, but in the silence of the local night it was surprisingly loud. Harry freed himself, shut off the blade, and handed it to Bruno. "Thank you, Vrax." "Wait until you're out of here before you thank me. We may all end up dead, but if we stay with the pirates, we will definitely be dead." In a matter of moments, the rest of the prisoners were freed. Though they had suffered losses at the hands of the pirates, they were bringing all the prisoners with them, even the ones who had been here before Harry's heroes, so they were more than before. That whole paragraph needs a rewrite. If this was going for publication, sorry, it needs a rewrite. Back to the story. Vrax led them out of the prison hold, and somehow they managed not to wake any of the pirates. They made it to one of the pirates' light freighters, and Vrax used his tools to unlock it. They all got in and locked the doors. While the rest of the heroes started pre-flight, Vrax took a few moments and set off all the sabotage devices. The pirates woke up when the heroes started their pre-flight. They chased the heroes into space, but when the heroes went into hyperspace, the pirates stayed behind. Harry's heroes returned with the Bekurin Defense Force and captured the pirates, except for Captain Lepidemain. He mysteriously escaped. Vrax stayed with Harry's heroes for a few years. They vied with Captain Lepidemain a few more times, with him hunting down the mercenaries looking for revenge. Vrax left on good terms with Harry. Vrax felt he had enough skills to move on to his main goal, freeing the people of Mon Calamari. There were rebels by then. The Rebel Alliance hadn't formed yet. The Gorman Massacre was still a few years away. Vrax's plan was simple. He was going to cut off the supplies to the Mon Cala blockade, and that should be enough to end it. Mon Cala was very rimward, just north of Hutt space, in a low population area of known space with very little Imperial presence. Mon Cala was the most important star system for light years around. Vrax needed a ship. Not just any ship, something he could upgrade into a combat ship. He had enough saved up to buy a broken freighter that he renamed Freedom's Sword. He borrowed a great deal of cash for some unsavory source to fix it up. I'm thinking Black Sun or the Hutts. The engines had to be replaced, and Vrax took the time to buy something more powerful and maneuverable. He upgraded his weapon system, added in a W334T turbo laser on the bottom weapon mount, and an F9 heavy ion cannon on the top weapon mount. Both fire control systems got serious upgrades. He redid the shield system, boosting both the particle and ray shields. He rebuilt the sensor suite, and Vrax tried everything together and tied everything together so he could run it all from the pilot's seat. Some of these upgrades were illegal under Imperial law, which forced Vrax to work out of Hutt space, outlaw ports, and smaller planets with little to no Imperial presence. It didn't matter. He became the scourge of the Outer Rim. No Imperial target was safe. Political bases, fighter bases, army forts, none of them were safe from strafing runs. Supply depots and convoys were Vrax's actually a pretty cool sounding name, were Vrax's favorite targets. What he couldn't steal, he blew up. His piloting skills were good, his gunnery skills better, but it was the ship that made things sing, and Vrax kept it running in tip-top shape. The shields and hull made starfighter weapons practically useless against him. The ion cannon could take out a TIE fighter in one shot, and the V-34T turbo laser could do damage to bulk freighters. While the fire control and maneuverability of the Freedom Sword with the fire control and maneuverability the Freedom Sword had, even a subpar pilot would be devastatingly excellent. Getting intel is what slowed him down. Hold on, I gotta pause it for a phone call. Sorry, guys. Usually a scam call. It was just a scam call. Somebody calling me with an offer from a robot that I could clearly refuse. Wow. Okay, let's see if I can get back into this. Getting intel is what slowed him down. Finding Imperial bases was easy enough, but then he had to scout them out, figure out what their strengths and weaknesses, and come up with a plan of attack. He was very successful, but he only hit 1 or 2 targets a month. Most of what he sold to rebel groups, and eventually the Rebel Alliance, making contacts there. The profits he made went to paying off his massive loan, and the rest went back into his ship. During these years of harassing the Empire, Vrax and Lepidemain faced off a number of times. The pirate never forgave Vrax for his betrayal on Endor and the destruction of his pirate fleet. Running in similar circuits as pirate and privateer, whenever they see each other, violence ensues. Lepidemain has issued a 500 credit bounty for Vrax, only good in Hutt space. Hardly worth it for most hunters, but with the way fortunes rise and fall, it is all Lepidemain could always afford. The good news is he destabilized the Imperial presence of the Calamari sector. He was a definite factor in the Mon Calamari uprising. The bad news was the Empire devoted resources to hunting down the Freedom's Sword. The Imperial Moff assigned 2 Corellian gunships to search and destroy the Freedom Sword. They chased Vrax through hyperspace from Mon Cala to the planet Taral 5, where they shot him down. It took 2 hits from their capital ship turbo lasers to take the Freedom Sword out of the sky. Vrax barely survived the crash. Terral 5 hadn't been inhabited in millennia. The last bit of important history about Terral 5 was that it had been the location of a military base for the Sith Empire back during the Galactic Cold War before the Republic and the Sith Empire. Vrax had been using the planet as one of his secret bases. It took weeks for Vrax to heal up. Once he did, he set to work on one of the ancient Imperial shuttles that had been abandoned there. It took a month. All he had to eat was the BEP he had scrounged up from the emergency rations off the Freedom Sword. He left the planet and limped to the Poseidena system. I think I pronounced that close to right. I think that may be the first time I've ever attempted to say that word out loud. Vrax sold the ancient ship to an antique dealer who was amazed that he had gotten the thing running. It was enough money to make his monthly payment, buy some needed tools, a blaster, and some other basic needs, like a meal that wasn't BEP. Since then, Vrax has been plying the spaceways as a nomadic ship mechanic. He steals the occasional ship from Imperials and sells it to the Rebel Alliance to make his loan payment. Shuttles, yachts from the Moffs, and the like. He wants back into the fight, but Vrax is very aware that he was such a potent enemy against the Empire because of his overpowered ship, not because he was a superior pilot. Personality. Vrax is calm, reserved, with quiet steel. He thinks his problems through before he acts. Once he commits to a decision, he follows through. Verpine, while not rare, are not common outside of the home of the Roche asteroid belt. Most Verpine can't imagine life without the constant communication with the rest of their people that their telecommunication ability grant them. I imagine it must be something like having a smartphone, only it's plugged directly into your brain. You can talk to anyone you want at any time. Vrax left early to go to university at Sluisvan and learn about technology from other species. He has spent most of his life away from Roche. Running into another Verpine is a pleasant experience. Vrax is a professional level fighter. Where he shines is when he has a chance to improve his weaponry. With the right weapons, he becomes a devastating warrior. Okay, so this guy is a little bit more balanced than Zhao Zhu. So he's 3D in dex, 2D in knowledge, 3D in mechanical, 2D in perception, 3D in strength, 5D in technical. It's a nice rounded edge right there. He's not good at sneaking, but he's got 40 in blaster, which puts him at professional level, 40 in dodge, 40 in starship piloting, 40 in starship gunnery. He's as good as he needs to be to do his job. He's 60 in starship weapons repair and 2D in advanced medicine, anyway. So this game I was going into had merits and flaws, which are kind of like the special abilities in the Transformers game, but different. A friend of mine, the guy who used to run games for me in Beas, actually came up with this system, and the guy who was running the game was using that system. I took advantage of it. I gave myself 60 worth of flaws so I could get 60 worth of merits. I gave myself more than 60. Anyway. Prodigy Technical, which costs 3D. It means that all technical skills cost half as much to improve. I don't really recommend this system. It really did unbalance the game. Ambidextrous 3D. I forget what ambidextrous does for you in the game. But I said if it doesn't apply to mechanical skills, I think it gives you an extra attack per round, unpenalized. So if it doesn't apply to mechanical skills, then I'd give him lucky. Lucky means you could never botch a wild die, which is pretty nice actually. Proposed flaws: enemy Captain Lepetamain, which is worth 2D. Dark Secret, member of the Rebel Alliance and captain of the Freedom Sword. So that was worth 1D. So that paid for one of my things. Debt. Whatever is left on his loan. Outfitting a ship the way Vrax did would cost as much as buying a house. He's been making payments for years, but the idea that he still has an average of 49,000 left seems legit. That's 7D. 7 dice times 3.5 average dice rolls, roughly 2,000 credits times 2,000 credits. So that was how we figured out debt for flaws. If those flaws are approved, I would put the additional 4 skill dice into gunnery, maybe sneak, and a few other technical skills, maybe security or demolitions. How do you run A engineering? Does it add to most technical roles? How do you do gear? Is there a specific cash amount? Is there a specific dice amount? So the way I run gear is I give you 10D worth of gear. And what that means is it's not a buy value as far as cost go, it's a buy value as far as practicality goes. So if you take like a blaster that does 5D damage, that's 5D of your 10D worth of gear. If you take armor that gives you plus 2D resistance to damage, to all damage, then that's 2D of your gear. I got a whole write-up on how I do it, leaving you with 3D worth of gear. So you can buy out you can always, sell your D in the gear for 1,000 credits a piece just to have walking around money. So if I just sold that at that point, I'd spend 7D on gear, 5D on the pistol, 2D on the armor. Then I'd have 3,000 credits in walking around money, which isn't a small amount. Remember, they could almost buy the Falcon for 10,000 credits back in Star Wars New Hope. That's almost enough to buy our own ship. Okay. It would be a great ship, but yeah. So I don't know how he was doing it. I didn't end up going with this character. I ended up going with Zhao Zhu. This may have actually been for a different game now that I'm thinking about it. It was many, many years ago. It was a really fun time though. And man, did I work out this whole debt system. I knew what I wanted, and I worked backwards to get it. So, anyway, thanks for listening, all you truckers out there, if you made it to the end. And I had a good time talking through this. This was a lot of fun, doing the voices and everything. Y'all have fun and keep on trucking, you blam blam truckers.